Thanks, Laverne and Robert, for being here today. So today we're talking about the Crawford Bay Commons Co-op and having a broad conversation about both the co-op and the co-op's location and in addressing some of the needs of the 21st century, as well as where we're at as a cooperative movement in Western Canada. I'm really interested to hear about these insights from Laverne and Robert, who together are members and leaders of the Crawford Bay Commons Co-op. So thank you so much for being here. I guess I just start out, I should introduce myself as well. My name is Elliot Bridgewater. I'm a co-op lawyer and advocate based out of Alberta and BC, and I'm highly interested in getting to know co-ops on a much more personal and deeper level. So this is all part of this conversation, and thank you so much for being here. So I guess I'll just start off by, if you could just introduce yourselves and the Crawford Bay Commons Co-op.
Okay. My name is Robert Agnew, and I am a founding member of the Crawford Bay Commons Cooperative. And we're located in, as they say, conveniently located halfway between Calgary and Vancouver on Kootenay Lake, at the end of the road, surrounded by wilderness. So this is a project that I guess began about in 2012. We incorporated the Crawford Bay Commons Cooperative, and we have on our registry 10 members. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of which are either resident full-time or part-time, and are at various levels of activity. We've kind of embarked on a course that is pretty typical for new cooperatives, trying to engage our creative capacities to enter an area that is not, it's where cooperatives have not been before, I guess.
So I became a member of the co-op in January 2012, the day it was incorporated. My name's Laverne Booth. I live here. I'm from Alberta. I moved out to the Slocan Valley 25 years ago, and then 13 years ago, I think it was, I decided to move over here to this land that Robert was developing as a co-op. You know, I lived in housing co-ops at the University in Edmonton. I loved it. And I just felt that it was, I love the idea of developing a model. I know many people who have a lot of land. They're penniless landowners. There are people that live out here because there's not much work and it's really hard to, you know, to generate a living in rural areas. And yet they have all of this land, this beautiful land, and they don't want to get rid of it, but they often have to sell it because there's no other options. So I really think that options needed to be developed. So I'm happy to support this. I was an educator. I'm a community planner by profession, and I have been, so I've been able to see the possibility of Crawford Bay Commons in our community and the different roles that it's played and will continue to play. And so what happened was I moved in here. Robert is constructing the community center, which is a massive cordwood masonry house. And if you've ever done cordwood masonry, you'll know that it's a very labor intensive process. Very beautiful. You know, we should show you some pictures. It's really lovely. So I moved in here, and because it's not quite done, we're still a bit of a construction zone here. I built my tiny home. So it's right, you know, 30 steps away from the main house. And I first built a little box, 12 foot by 18 foot. And then I've since put on a bathroom and a large porch. And I paid $5,000 for 100 land units. And then I've put in the money to construct this little house, and this little bedroom studio is actually what it is.
I'm really interested in perhaps digging in a little bit to how you define access, for instance. So what does that look like for people, for members? And then also stewardship. If that's embedded in membership, what does it look like for members' entitlements, but also responsibilities? Interested in that.
So I think the key characteristics of the Crawford Bay Commons Co-op is that it's a stewardship cooperative, and it's access to land and land resources. More than it's kind of an evolution beyond the land co-ops, the cooperatives where the focus is on sharing land. The thing that's unique about this is that we're trying to find a path that makes it possible for private landowners to share access to land. And just to give a little background, and what happened is when myself and my original partner came out here by bicycle from Calgary, we were quite enamored by the whole Kootenay Lake area and East Shore in particular. And it didn't take very long before our friends in here said, well, you're here all the time, why don't you just buy some land and homestead like they have, because it's a lot of homesteading in this area. So we actually had a list of what we were looking for. We looked all over northern Saskatchewan and Alberta, and we ended up here with our list. And when we came to this actual physical location on the side of the mountain, we looked around and everything that was on our list was here. And there was so much more that it was just, the abundance of this place was just hit us really strongly. And within 5 minutes, my partner turned to me and said, this is more than we need. We have to find a way to share this. So I have a cooperative background. I've been involved in cooperatives pretty well all my life. And it just seemed to me that there's a lot of obstacles in sharing land, and we needed to overcome some of those. And so some of the issues, basically security of tenure and succession planning, and how to actually bring those co-op principles to fruition in a way that I had been experiencing all my life, but I just wanted to see how far we could go. So we've modeled the incorporation after our eco village on Vancouver Island. If you're familiar with that cooperative, there was probably 10 years of preparation and people involved in developing best practices for a multi-stakeholder, multi-purpose land sharing cooperative. And they have established a way of dealing with the same issues that we're dealing with here, and yet there's some unique characteristics. Crawford Bay Commons Co-op was also established as an investment co-op, and that was before the investment co-ops. It was involved in some of the early stages for the investment co-ops out of Creston with Eden Yesh, and so over the course of time, people have had good reasons for coming here and living here for months or even years at a time, and they've also had good reasons for going. And the challenge has been finding a way for the reasons, the capacity to stay, to really be well established, so that even though there's quite a few of us that are involved here right now, we did actually have to sell part of the land, or I had to sell part of the land to pay off the mortgage. And so, developed 2 lots. It took me 2 years to do that subdivision. And currently we have wonderful neighbors. And we have the capacity to accommodate more people here, either as permanent residents or as member participants that come on as a visiting basis. But the whole thing about living at the edge, at the end of the road, surrounded by wilderness, with all the challenges of being in a remote place, really come to fore when we talk about being stewards of the land that we have and our relationship to the wilderness. this is land that was an old homestead established in 1904. And was, you know, eventually bought up by the local golf course for development, and it was logged. And so it's a recovering site in terms of our relationship to the forest. But having been here 30 years now, a lot has happened. And the relationship that I've had as a steward to the land, and I feel like my role as a steward is to prepare the way for others to share this place. So even though there's been over 25 people that have come here and lived here at one point or another, we still need to go through the next steps of reincorporating in such a way that we can accomplish a more direct and whole relationship to being here. And so a stewardship relationship is, you know, what we try to develop. And security of tenure needs to be figured out. And really what we're trying to do is change ownership to belonging. And that's why access to land becomes more important than land ownership. And that principle is what we want to be able to establish as a pilot for other private landowners. There are many here that have a lot and they're aging. They have trouble knowing what to do with all this land that they have, and be able to either sell it or have other people share it, and help them with the services. So that's a few elements that we're dealing with right now.
That's really unpacking the entire philosophy of land tenure in Western civilization, it seems, and deconstructing it and rebuilding it. So no small challenge.
One of the things that we've talked about is security of tenure. So definitely, I've lived here for 10 years. I pay very little money a month to live. I share the cost of the utilities, basically. And then my daughter lives in another area, and she's going to soon start having babies. So I am going to be selling my little piece and moving somewhere else, although I'll still be a member of the co-op and still very active, I hope. But so that the way we work that out is that, so all the money that I've put into that house is, I can sell it basically at cost, not at cost, at the market value when it's time to sell. However, the people that buy in will have to be members of the co-op, and they will have to make their own agreement about using that land, you know, so pay money to use that particular footprint of land. So that's the plan for succession. And there's so many things to work out. For me, I'm particularly important about communication skills. Like there's a couple of sort of unwritten, we hope that everybody comes that wants to live here has a daily practice, so that we don't have to be doing all their processing for them. They can do it for themselves as much as possible. And we have other little things like, you don't need to go to a meeting if you're not involved. Like decisions need to be made by the people involved. So if we're setting up a chicken coop, we decide how much it's going to cost, people put in the money, we make it happen, we benefit, you know, members benefit from that, you know, who's ever been part of that project. But if I'm living down there and I'm not part of a project, I don't have to be going to meetings about it. So trying to keep all of that really simple so that the communication is, you know, a good experience for us all. But that's a sort of a typical way that a member would be involved. The other thing is that we want people to live here for a year before we make a final decision, whether that person makes a final decision. We live on a route that has a ferry. Like you have to take a ferry to get into Nelson. I mean, there's challenges living in rural areas. It's a lot of work. We heat by wood. We you know, we have a big garden. There's a lot to do. And so I forget where I was going with that.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, rural life is challenging, so people need to try it out before they're going to know. And you know, and with younger people, like there's property here, people could come and build a off-grid house, you know, no problem. But you know, there's a lot that goes into that. Like luckily we have a wood lot, so wood can be harvested. We've got garden spots, and you know, it's here, but it's work. So people need to try it out before we make a final decision, basically.
Yeah, and I have to say, Crawford Bay, having driven through there a few times, is always a standout, beautiful area that I've always dreamed. Dreamed of, looked at properties in those moments of MLS searchery, and found just, I mean, beautiful area. It's such a beautiful area. So,
well, there's a
you are
co-op.
kind of in an Eden of sorts.
There's a co-op in Crawford Bay. You can come here and live.
Yeah,
We'll talk to you later.
absolutely. But I'm interested in the stewardship principles. Is that something that you build into your governance or co-op documents, or is that something that's kind of an iterative and more social dynamic? I guess, or is it both?
It's both, and it's transitional. The original incorporation, the values that are stated in that, I think they're listed on our old website. But the values and the cooperative intentions really do focus on the valuing of the stewardship relationship. I've taken it a few steps further, and the land-based value system is connected to a part of the land that we call the park, the Wildgate Park. And it's actually adjacent to wild land, to public land. And so you can walk out the back door and walk up through the residential area and through the woodlot and into the park, and then beyond that into the wilderness. And the relationship that I have established for myself is one of living on that cusp between, you know, domesticated land and wild land. And the house that we're in right now, the garden house, is actually, you go out up the hill and you're in forest, and you go down the hill and you're in the garden. What I've been trying to do is to establish an economic relationship to the land that respects the permanence and immutability of land. And that is different from having an economy that's based on gold or oil or the American dollar or whatever. Because what we've discovered here is that there's the transactions that take place with money, and there's also the transactions that take place without money. But the value that's added without money is hard to quantify, and it's hard to respect. And when you walk into the forest, there's a whole experience that you can't monetize. So being able to add value to being here as a human being, and being able to transact based on the value that you've created as a human being, can be quite separate from the monetary system. But we're just in the process now of mapping the entire commons and identifying all the different areas, the horticultural area, the woodlot, the residential area, the riparian zones, the park, all of those aspects, and identifying what it is that we value about all of those. So when someone comes here and wants to participate in the projects that are located here, those projects will be located in one part of the commons or another. Every member will be located, you know, in a project in the park itself. So your first membership land unit is a gift that you're given when you buy your first membership share in the co-op. So that membership, first membership share, is your voting share. That That's whenever you're involved in a project, you have your one member, one vote. But then in order to invest in a project, there's an investment, there's a cash cost, but there's also your skills, your labor, your experience, your tools, your equipment, whatever it is that you're contributing to that project. And so having the value system that's based on land at par value, and then any qualities that you add to that project is recorded in relationship to that land unit. So I'm trying to find the simplest way to demonstrate how that actually works. And I think that there's a couple of things that we're going to be asking for help with. And one of them is establishing the relationship, the legal relationship, and the relationship with the Securities Commission, and the with land titles. So who holds a title and what does that title represent? So those are things that I've tried to establish the framework for that, but then there's a lot of action that needs to be taken in order to convert that relationship into a form that people can understand and can do what it's intended to do. See, currently I'm the owner of the land. I have set a goal for when I turn 75 in just less than 2 years, I want to transfer the title to the co-op. And so we've set a timeline. And my hope is that I can continue to be here as a resident, but not as the boss of everything and the owner of everything and holding all the power for everything. I want that transferred, because I'm just getting tired of having to be the one that everybody comes to figure stuff out. So that ownership, so if that ownership is not transferred to a co-op, I'd still like to establish a relationship with access to this land that gives people the security of tenure and a say in the things that that affect them. So as Corky Evans said, you're trying to change the whole economy. And it's like, well, I hope not, but maybe a bit of it. And so it's a challenge.
So what are yeah, let's dig into that a little bit, like the challenges of being the owner of this land and then trying to facilitate a different relationship for people coming on a land, access and stewardship with the land, perhaps in-kind services that are assessed value in relation to the predominant monetary system. These are all challenges that have kind of fallen, I guess, by default on the landowners' feet as in our fee simple private property ownership existence. So what are some of the challenges you faced? I mean, perhaps anecdotally, with members, with governance. Is there anything that you'd like to share in that regard?
Currently, the co-op has been deregistered because we have not maintained our the official documentation that you're required to file every year for who's on the board, and but that doesn't mean that the cooperation hasn't continued. So reestablishing a relationship to the official organs is well, we want to reincorporate it in such a way that what we're doing here fits in. We're just small in numbers and we're very busy. So developing that expertise or having access to that expertise to follow through on that is our major challenge right now. I write every day and I try to establish over time the various elements that would be involved in doing a reincorporation. And my hope is that we can just put something on the shelf that says this is a way of doing things that would fit this situation, and open it to prospective members to come and take it from there. So we're very close in that respect. It's just, you know, the COVID situation in the last couple of years kind of shut us down, because we were going to open things up to workshops, to do cordwood masonry workshops and gardening workshops and rock wall building and, you know, forest things and walks in the park and all of that kind of stuff. So we haven't been doing that. And we foresee that soon we will be opening that up again. So there's just so much to do that we want to involve other people in a way that is going to make sense for them, so that when they contribute and they put their hard effort and experience and finances and tools and equipment and all that into this project, that they have a secure relationship with what comes out of it. And the only way that I can really think of that is having a cooperative that provides access to the land, that also includes security of tenure, in a way that instead of subdividing it up into a multitude of lots, you have people able to come and go and be a part of the process, and have the valuing of what they contribute that they can then use for exchange. I was involved in Barter Systems Calgary when it was growing in Calgary, and eventually got sold to TradeX. But I really came to respect the value of having exchange of inventory and services that businesses often have in abundance, but you know, without the marketing and the monetizing of that, they don't get to actually make use of their services and inventory. Well, on this location, there is an incredible inventory of wild land, you know, for people to go and walk and be in the forest. That's an exchangeable value, but it's not a monetizable value. So how to have access to that, and even to have access remotely from someone who's never going to set foot here, but is able to take a virtual walk in the park, to be a part of a stewardship project in the park where they join people that are residents here, who are visitors here, and who are afar, that can still, you know, share the experience of a wild place and contribute to the growth and a good relationship with that wild place by, you know, offering their services, whatever they might be. So I just really see that, you know, I spent enough time in Indigenous communities that I just have a very high respect for the relationship that a human being can have to a wild place. And it doesn't have to be exploitive. It can be spiritual, it can be nurturing, it can be so much more than, you know, what our society tends to think of in our relationship to a wilderness. And it's more than just a place to go for a hike and have lunch and take a few pictures. It's so much more. So.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, you touched on something that's really important to address, is that co-ops are more than the legal form, and the co-op principles at their heart are something that is shared culturally in many cultures, in our culture included, but to some extent marginalized under a prevailing ideology, let's say, of the market. But what I often say when people talk to me about, you know, well, what does it matter about, you know, the legal structure or the co-op model in general? Why don't we just do it through a corporation, or just do it because we, as a group, in an informal manner? You know, I think it's important more than the monetary value of the co-op or the land tenure or the assets. It's important from a legacy perspective. It's important to establish shared principles, to ensure that those shared principles hold each other accountable in a organized form, in a group, so that we can move forward together and make decisions in a reasoned way, in a democratic way. And that democratic aspect of cooperatives is a collective action challenge at the best of times. And so when you do have some rules by which we can play the game that are clear, that are principled, that are that are connected with the circumstances of the members, then you have a foundation for a sustained cooperative enterprise that can grow and can be resilient. And it's something that I like to emphasize because cooperatives are not immune to attrition or demutualization or just a decline in their own self-awareness. And I think we've seen a lot of that over the past 40 years, but probably especially 30. And so I think that it's important to kind of reemphasize that. I guess just to transition, I'm really interested. You live in an area where there's a lot of co-ops. There's a lot of co-ops, as I understand from my chats with co-op leaders in the area, like John Steinman, and reading his book, Grocery Story. A lot of 60s influence that counterculture that used co-ops in a very socially progressive way that is to some extent different or distinct from the 30s co-ops. Could you chat about kind of your relationship with co-ops in the area or the co-op community?
I think you can attribute a lot of that to the youth of. There's a lot of people that have homesteaded here, a lot of people that have come here from away looking for a place to call home. And what I've really noticed is that the younger generation now are more interested in having access to things than ownership, whether it's a car or a house, or there's a lot more need and interest in sharing access. So when I think of prospective members coming here, I think of those young people who have developed a sense of cooperation and have expressed it in so many different ways. I think of my daughter who is working in Victoria with unhoused people right now and harm prevention. And she's surrounded by people who have been let out of the system for one reason or another. And there's just a very high interest in, especially young people, to be able to come and kind of start over, or, have a family, raise their children here. And it's also true for a lot of elderly people who, I don't know about elders, but people who have done their thing in business, and they've made their nest egg, and they want to come and just enjoy a place like this. And in the last 2 years, we've had a big influx of people that have just decided that they've had it with the city and they've got to come out. And many of them have visited here before, and many have summer places here. But this is a pattern that's been going on for, since the 60s. And what happens when people who have come here, in order to thrive here, you need to be able to bring a lot of skills, because it's not always money that you can bring. And to be able to cooperate with other people, your neighbors, your friends, your family, get help where you can, figure stuff out. It's this amazing combination of just the individualism and the like, I can do this feeling with, boy, it would sure help if I had my neighbor come over now and they show up and they've got what you need to finish doing what you're doing. And even just such things as sharing access to the water system, a common concern about wildfires, which has been a big thing this summer, being able to support the elders during COVID, like they're so isolated. And there's been a lot of efforts to try and make it go out here in the middle of nowhere and do it together. But I've been involved in quite a few of the co-ops in this area and helped start some of them and help, evolve some of them. And the thing that I notice the most is that the spirit of cooperation is a thing. It's when you're working with a group of half a dozen or a dozen people, or you're in a meeting, and there's an entity that enters that experience that you can't quantify, and you can't say, well, that's so-and-so, but there's that, I call it the spirit of cooperation. It's that thing that you feel when you're able to do more than you can do all by yourself. When you realize that when you do things together, there's a power that comes with that. And to be able to share and distribute that power within a group is very powerful. And what I'm trying to do is to match that with what I experience in the power of the wild. The spirit of the wild is also has its own integrity. When I walk into the wild, I don't experience what I experience when I go to the city. What I experience when I go to the city is something that I call wild. It's like there's chaos, there's noise, there's distraction, there's so much happening in that city environment. For me, the wild is a gentle, nurturing thing. And that's the same thing in a cooperative. It's not like you're in a competitive, go for it environment. You're in an environment where you're sharing the human capacity to cooperate, to do things together, to share, to make something more than you can do by yourself. And when you walk into a forest that is whole and thriving, there's a whole energy that I experience personally when I am there. And that's why I spend so much time outside, because that's what nurtures me. And I want to share that. So it's a combination of the spirit of the wild, the spirit of cooperation. If there's going to be another principle of cooperation, it would be that stewardship relationship to the land, the wilderness. And if we can establish something here that demonstrates that capacity and share that capacity, I think we've done a lot. I think we've done something.
That's fascinating. Can you imagine the how the world would be if a principle of stewardship was codified in our law, co-op or otherwise? But be quite the fascinating change in our perspective and our mentality around our earth.
We have a lot of private land logging going on around here now that the price of wood is up, and it's scary because there's no way as a community we've met to see what we could do to stop these guys that are coming in and clear cutting, and there's nothing to stop that. So private property rules, and it would be great to develop more along those lines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are a lot of examples of cooperatives in the area that are unique and strong and doing well. The
Kootenay Co-op.
The Kootenay Co-op, the Cooperative, the community forest co-ops. There's so many examples of what we can do, but each one of them have had to go up against the way things are usually done. And the way things are usually done, in my mind, are problematic because they produce results that are not sustainable. And when we have an environmental crisis, you see it out here. You smell the smoke from the fires. You see the clear-cut areas. You see the logs jamming up the ferry so you can't get to your doctor's appointment. We see all of the effects of all of that out here, which may not be visible from the city, but it's really noticeable here. And that's why people have really tried to work together to do something different. And we're no different than that. I mean, it's a cultural thing out here. And yeah, this region is the hotbed of cooperatives, and we ain't stopping. It's going to continue.
Well, it's inspiring, and I mean, that spirit of cooperativism that you mentioned, I think, is touches a bit of a nerve. When I look at my generation and but particularly the younger generation, like my brother who's 21, my other brother who's 19, and and the attrition of our economic situation as well as our environmental situation is almost physically pressing on them in a way it's going to drastically impact their future in a way that maybe I was the last of a generation able to benefit from the legacy of a certain kind of economics that was still working and when I went to school. And so, I wonder about that spirit of cooperativism, how it's tied to need, but also how we might be able to spread that spirit of cooperativism, perhaps through education. But I wonder, from your perspective, what kind of education can facilitate that spirit of cooperativism? What do we need to be teaching both youth but also adults about the circumstances we find ourselves in 2021?
We are at an unprecedented potential right now because we have a bunch of people who want to be individuals and we want to contribute. And the co-op movement internationally is very, very exciting. There is so much going on and we need to open up that world. Like there's co-ops in data co-ops, for example. It's called Mutual Interest Media, and the members send in their articles, and I'm going to send you the link. It's amazing, the articles from all over the world about the leadership that co-ops are taking right now because of the situation. And there's things like exit to community. All our small businesses, they're hurting badly, and there are opportunities there. And I would send classes into high schools and have them develop cooperative businesses, like do cooperative business development on every level, even in colleges when they're trying to prepare them to go out and take their skill into the world. That's the moment. Like and the kids love it. We've done a little bit here, and it's definitely the way to go. Yeah. Just get the word out, just have them practice making them, give them the skills, give them the information. I find what we're lacking here is one, financial aid. And honestly, if new startup co-ops can use the 10,000 bucks, like that is very, very valuable. And mentorship and, help with identifying co-ops that are doing the same thing in other places, just making those relationships incredibly useful. I don't find that we have the support in the co-op sector. I don't know, I'm at least out of touch with it. It's not coming to me to tell me what the opportunities are. We have to go searching for it. And it's really in the background and it needs to come to the forefront now because it's a very good opportunity right now and people are hurting. There's so much, and we want to be ourselves and we want to contribute to see something, and we want to make decisions over what's impacting our lives, like media. I love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a timely challenge to ourselves who are members of the cooperative movement to support one another in solidarity. That obviously evokes cooperation among cooperatives and also concern for community. So it is tied together, and we need to be very proactive about that in the cooperative community. And perhaps we haven't been enough in the recent past. So I think that is a good challenge, and that's not laying the blame at any one person's or entity's feet, but it is a collective challenge, and I think it's a timely one. Is there anything, I guess, you mentioned young people, I mentioned my little brothers, I'm really concerned about their ability to experience even financial success, even to afford land or a home to call their own, to have any kind of real property rights going forward, or even the right to access, right? Because so much is exclusive about property ownership in our society. I mean, Robert, you've kind of pioneered a different way of relating to your own land. You've also obviously cruised out there on a bike and taken major risks in engaging the co-op model. what kind of advice would you give to young men and women that are interested, and are tired of the status quo, want to make a big change, want to engage in solidarity and community and democratic enterprise?
Well, there's the process that I would support is, to me, it begins with sharing values and understanding what principled cooperation is. And the best way to do that is to get involved in a cooperative and be active in it. There's a lot of passive activity, especially, in credit unions and large scale co-ops. And we saw what happened with Mountain Equipment Co-op. If members aren't active and involved in the governance of the things that are affecting them, you can't expect change to happen very quickly. But I really feel like if you're sharing values, you're sharing principled cooperation, the conversation can lead to a common understanding of what we need together and what our capacity is to meet that need together. And then when we have a common understanding, we can establish a common intention. What can we do together to initiate the change that we need? And when you have a common endeavor as a cooperative, the people that are involved are making the decisions. That self-governance part of cooperation involves sharing the benefits. And it's so different from corporate models. It's so different from other ways that people, do what they need to do. Cooperation there's equity involved. There's openness. Those principles are powerful. And when you can actually understand them and embark on a common endeavor to have those principles in your day-to-day decision-making, you can go someplace. And it's direct experience. I think that, I'm a believer in direct democracy. I'm not really great on representative democracy, and co-ops have kind of gone off on the representative democracy. And we didn't have that in housing co-ops. We didn't have that so much in daycare co-ops. A lot of the alternative co-ops really are quite effective in direct democracy. And when I worked at Co-op College, one of the things that I really noticed as an instructor is that a lot of the people that were coming to the college for courses were in the mainstream co-ops, the credit unions, federated co-ops, the wheat pools, and they were kind of stuck on protecting what they've got. And in order to really be supportive, cooperative to cooperative, you need to kind of let go of your hold on power and resources and all of that stuff. So I'm hoping that young people can go with the values that they've come up with and be given the opportunity to be active in expressing those values, common understanding, common intention. And that's what I would be encouraging to anybody that shows up here is like, what do you need personally? And what do we do together to meet those needs?
Well, thank you so much. I'm conscious of our time limitations today, but I think this is just the beginning of the conversation, and we could really delve into some of these issues and principles in a meaningful way. But I'll end it here today. Thank you so much for your time, for all that you're doing in your community. And for being leaders in cooperative change. I have to say that we have the gathering of cooperatives. So we are trying to get everybody together, at least in Alberta, October 26th to 28th, and I believe that's in Edmonton. But there'll also be some remote sessions, I believe, and we'll be also, I believe, running a podcast on a panel with a bunch of co-op leaders. And I think that this challenge, again, to engage in this conversation is something that I certainly will be bringing forward at the gathering, and so yeah, the conversation is really just beginning. So again, thank you. Is there any kind of last concluding thoughts you'd like to leave us with today?
Yeah, I just got to say that the potential for co-ops in daycare, home care, healthcare, elder care is really, really important, and it could be advanced a lot right now.
And the barriers that are being created by various levels of government need to be dealt with, because
Yeah,
we've seen that.
yeah.
I just really appreciate reaching out to us and, listening to what we have to say. I wish that we could be more articulate in defining something which is probably a little bit different, and I'm looking forward to engaging with the other people that would like to share this experience of being a steward of land.